Good evening, everyone. We'll call to order the Planning Commission meeting March 20th, 2018. We have 6 of 7 commissioners in attendance this evening. We excuse Commissioner Judy Hansen. We welcome the public and applicants and staff this evening. Hope you enjoy your time together. We have one item of business on our consent calendar consisting of approval of minutes from March 6, 2018. Commissioner Quinney.
Thank you. I move that we approve the minutes as contained in the packet.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion? Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Quinney and a second by Commissioner Hatch. Any discussion to the motion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously 6-0, which brings us to the first public hearing this evening. Dannon Way Industrial Park, 6300 West Dannon Way, preliminary subdivision plat, 12 lots on 18.1 acres in an M1 zone. CIR Engineering, Scott Thorson, is the applicant. Yes, if we could please have the applicant come up first to present. Oh. The procedure I believe that we have is at our discretion. We can either consider the application or we can postpone. Do we have any, or we can go to the end of the meeting?
Let's do that.
Commissioner Quinney.
I move that we flip-flop public hearings 2 and 3 and see what bears out from that.
Thank you, Commissioner Luthi.
I'll second that.
Great, thank you. Motion by Commissioner Quinney, second by Commissioner Luthi. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously 6-0. We'll move forward to item number 3 on the agenda, Eastview Estates, 7100 South, 5490 West, General Plan Land Use Map Amendment for 18.32 acres from very low density residential to medium density residential and rezone from RR-1D Rural Residential 1 acre minimum lots zone and RR20F ZC Rural Residential 20,000 square foot lots with zoning conditions zone to R110E Single Family Residential 10,000 square foot lots minimum zone. Bowler Development LLC, Lynn Bowler is the applicant. Please feel welcome to come forward and present your application.
Good evening, Lynn Bowler, 7095 South, 5490 West is my address.
Thank you.
In West Jordan. I'm excited to be in front of you. The situation is interesting for us. We develop in a lot of cities and certainly have done a lot here in West Jordan. This happens to be across the street from where I live. And so when I was given the opportunity to purchase the property, I thought it was a good opportunity to upzone the area, if you will. So there's R16 across the street to the west, Ochre Shadows to the north, which is also R16 in that area. It is R18 a little bit further to the east. My goal here is to establish something maybe a little bit less dense and a little bit bigger homes for the area. So I think it's not that this is what I would normally do, but a little bit of a different approach for me this time. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thanks very much. Any questions for the applicant tonight, Mr. Bowler? We'll reserve some time if there's anything that needs to be addressed after public comment.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McCandless, you have this item for the city?
I do, thank you. Members of the Planning Commission, Mr. Chairman, just to orient you with this site, it's located between, kind of the overhead, it shows you 5600 West, which is on the west side of the street, and this is 5490, which extends up this way. 5490 is actually a private street. The applicant is looking at developing this property as a single-family residential subdivision sometime in the near future, and he is requesting that the property be rezoned and that the future land use map be amended to reflect that zoning. This is the future land use map showing what the 2012 general plan is designated it as. As you can see, it's located in what we call a very low-density residential area. To the east is an area that's designated as low-density residential, and then across 5600 West, which is a major arterial street, is an area that's designated on the future land use map as high-density residential. Low-density residential that's just south of that. So as you're looking at this, again, we're looking at amending the future land use map, and one of the things you'll need to look at is whether this makes sense. This is the zoning map. It shows this as the subject property as what we call a rural residential zoning district. The 20 means that 20,000 square feet is the minimum lot size for that district, which is roughly half acre. The area that surrounds it, though, is zoned rural residential with 1 acre lots here. Further to the east, this area is all rural residential, and these are half acre lots. And so what the applicant is looking at doing is rezoning this property to a minimum, well, it's a sub-zoning that's R110, where the minimum lot size is 10,000 square feet. Back in January, I think it was on the 2nd, the General Plan Committee that was recently organized took a look at this. They considered the land uses that were surrounding it, and they had ultimately recommended that the future land use map just stay at either a very low density or low density, just simply because as we note in finding F, that there are adequate number of areas that are zoned or designated as medium density residential, not too many that are still left in the city that are still designated as low density or very low density. So they had made a recommendation to the Planning Commission that it either stay, again, low density or very low density. When you look at that, we were looking at kind of a transition. Again, these are half acre lots. These will develop at some point in the future, but to keep this consistent with the development that's in the area, at least on the east side of 5600 West, we were thinking that the staff concurred with the General Plan Committee. We think that the larger lots kind of make more sense. And it does act as some kind of a transition towards those smaller lots, but we still think that a low-density residential designation on that property with perhaps R112 F zoning would be more appropriate for this area and given the existing uses in the area. So that is our recommendation. So again, the applicant is requesting R110 zoning. Staff is recommending the R112 F zoning. Just, yeah, Larry is saying this property that's just on the west side was changed to R18 with a medium density designation on that.
Great, thank you.
Just didn't get the updated map.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. McCandless?
No, that's it.
Great, thank you. Questions for staff, commencing with Commissioner Quinney, please.
Yes, thank you. I have two questions. The first one, this is now the third piece of property that we've considered on this road for this development company, right? What did we rezone the other two to? It looks like it's R112, if I'm seeing that at the bottom of the screen there. R112 on the other two. And the other question, just because I was looking on here and I couldn't find it, what's the difference in the number of units in this neighborhood if we go 12 versus 10?
I haven't calculated that out. It's probably not a sizable number. My guess is probably 5 units.
It could be as many as 5 different units.
That's just a guess.
That seems like a lot to me. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Green.
Now I've got two questions. Given, this is currently on the general land use plan as very low density, how many other areas do we have that are designated as very low density in the city, or is this one of the last remaining holdouts?
There are still some, I don't have the future land use map in front of me, but there are still some areas that are out on the west side of, I want to say U-111 that are still designated as very low density. There are some scattered ones that are still left, but those are primarily west of U-111.
So the second question is, this very low density area that's designated on the land use map, how far south does it, obviously the northern boundary is 70th south, how far south does this?
To 78th.
To 78th? Okay.
Commissioner Luthi.
Just so I am clear, the area just right there to the west that said low density that you just said got rezoned to the medium density,
Yes.
that's the area that just came before us not that long ago, correct? And we wanted an R110 and it ended up being an R18?
I think that's the one, right?
Because that's the Ivory subdivision right next to it, correct? Okay.
Right.
Any other questions for staff?
Just clarification.
Hatch.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, Chairman. Clarification on the boundaries again. How far south? Is it 7,800 south? We're getting some question on that.
You're asking where it is on this map?
Is it,
It's just barely off the
Okay.
edge of the map. I think it's.
so there's commercial below it then? Is that correct?
I'm going to see if I can. I'm going to see if I can pull up the land use map here.
Okay. Okay. But what they wanted commercial.
And so while he's pulling that up, from the calculations I've done earlier, there's about 1,322 acres in the city, either developed low, very low density, or very low density, or about 6%, a little over 6% of the city is very low density.
Let's see if I can. The areas that are in the very light yellow are the areas that are zoned or designated as the very low density residential. That would be here,
There.
here, some here.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate
So
that.
I'll zoom into this area that we were talking about, and you can see the land use map. So, sorry, I can't take the designations off of there, but this is it. The property's right here. 7,800 south is right here.
Can you zoom out just a hair?
Out?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just want to get a feeling of context. Okay.
Commissioner England.
Yeah, on page 12 on the staff report, subdivision kind of plat we're looking at, is that based on the application of R110?
It is.
It is, okay.
And that, keep in mind, that's just a concept plan.
Concept, correct.
The city has some issues with it. So it's just
Yeah, well,
a
idea.
concept.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Well, this was agendized as a public hearing, so if anyone would like to speak on this item, please feel welcome to come forward at this time.
Randy Bowler, 6663 South, 2200 West, West Jordan. It's important for you to know that I'm totally a neutral party here. As I look at this and as I've listened to the discussion, my professional opinion as a real estate broker and developer would be that it would be wise and logical to consider a somewhat of a transition as we go from the Oak Shadows near 112 zone across 5600 West to the R18 zone, that particularly on this, the west side of 5490, that needs to be somewhat of a transition from those two different zones. And so I think the R110 is a logical way to deal with that, to go from R18 to R110, then on over to the R112. I think it would be difficult to run R112 clear up to 5600 West with the traffic that's already there and future traffic that would be there. So I would speak in favor of this application that be granted on the basis of an R110. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowler. Would anyone else like to speak on this item?
Hi, Kyle Bybee. I went skiing today, so I'm a little bit red, sorry. I currently live at 7252 South 5490, and so I'm on the west side there. You saw my house there on one of the former slides, but I'm just here to speak in favor of this application. For my wife and I, it's difficult to be able to find lots that are quarter acre or larger in West Jordan, and we love it. West Jordan, we would hate to move, and we're absolutely in favor of this and support it wholeheartedly.
Great, thanks, Mr. Bybee. We hope the slopes treated you well today. Would anyone else like to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment portion of the meeting and bring it back to discussion by the Planning Commission. Commissioner Green.
I've got a couple of comments. The first comment is that I don't think we have the general land use area, and this general land use area is very low density at this point in time, and I don't think we have a whole lot of very low density left in the city. Most of it is west of U111, as Mr. McCandless has said. The difficulty that I have is when we start to carve, if we carve this out as any development, the rest, then the argument will be, well, you allowed an R110 in there, let's make the rest R18, R110, R1 something else, because it's a good transition between the high density that should not have ever been put in there in the first place, but it's a transition from the high density to the low density. My question is, why don't we keep this low density? And even if we make this low density, we carve out basically an island in the low density, and what we're going to go down the road is everything. If we decide to approve or recommend to the council this particular decision, what we have to understand is the rest of this very low density is going to be rezoned to something else. And I think what we're going to get is a piecemeal. We'll get very low density. My guess is the piece of property on the corner is 70th and 56th. Will go some sort of neighborhood commercial or something, but which is okay by me, and anything along 70th going commercial is okay by me. But if we recommend approval, we have to understand that we're going to basically in the immediate short term, or fairly short, in the some short term, we're going to end up having this area, the whole area, be rezoned. The future land use map will go from very low density to something, and the question is low density appropriate? If we make it low density, it maintains the character of the neighborhood to the east and some to the south. Low density makes more sense than medium density, and there's no way I'm going to vote for medium density here tonight on this one at all. The other thing that that we've talked about in this commission and along with the city council is that the applicant has the burden of proof to tell us why the current general land use plan is wrong and why we ought to amend it. I haven't heard anything where that changes why we should go from very low density. I don't think we have any other, anything that says, hey, we don't need, we're overburdened in very low density housing, or the legislature passed a law that wants us to have more moderate income, so we want to put that here or something. That's not what's happening here, and I don't hear any evidence for that particular purpose. Like I said, if this becomes if we talk about transition, and the rest of the property is going to transition to something, and I am not sure that we want to change the character of the low density to the east. And like I said, I think we're heading down a slippery slope here in this particular area, and I'm just not convinced yet that doing away with the very low density, doing away with the very low density is the appropriate thing in the city.
Thank you, Commissioner Green. Mr. Murray, question for you, please, because of the very poignant comment on if we take this action, what might happen, what might be precipitated by it. A bit of conjecture or hypothesizing. Do we need to consider this item just on its standalone merit, or can we bring what Commissioner Green said into the scope of that, very likely that could happen if you carve out a piece, then another piece goes. Does that question make sense?
It does. Obviously your main analysis should be dealing just with the staff report and just with the land in question, but anytime you're looking at the general land use map, which is, you're looking at that entire map, and you obviously need to take into account especially immediately surrounding areas. I think you just need to be careful with the conjecture portion of it, the speculation portion, but I think the part that you can definitely take into account is connectivity to adjacent areas and those kinds of things, especially the various elements in the plan that if, just how does changing this on the general plan affect the related pieces. I think when you start crossing the lines and maybe going a little bit outside the scope of your authority is when you start guessing and anticipating what uses or projects may come in. I would stay just to the facts of, how does this mesh with existing rather than potential future uses, and how does everything mesh with existing other portions of the elements of the plan, such as transportation and so forth. So in a nutshell, I'd say, just be careful with anything that's guessing or futuristic and stay focused on what's currently there, and especially in the surrounding what's currently on the map and where the transportation corridors currently, and how would granting this application affect those things.
Thank you. Commissioner Green, would you like to follow up on that before we go to Commissioner Luthi?
Sure.
Thank you.
As I'm looking at the criteria 1 is that it's consistent with the purpose, goals, objectives, policies of the city general plan. I don't think that the general plan, and so I'll limit this to what we're doing is we're creating a carve out in this very low density area, and we're amending the general land use map with an island, with a carve out. And I don't think that's consistent with the purposes and the goals of the city and the policies of the general land use plan. I think we want consistent planning. And number 2 is that criteria number 2 says that it will result in compatible use land and relationships. So what we've got in this area then was, yes, you have low density to the east, but then you're going to have a very low density in the middle. Then you're going to have a low density, and then you're going to go back to a low density, and you're going to create that island again, and I don't think that creates a compatible land use. So, I might speculate on the fact that that's going to be a slippery slope, but the fact of the matter is it creates an island that's not compatible with the land use around it, because it is an island, and it's not, and I don't think that's consistent with the purposes, goals, objectives, and policy of the city's plan.
Thank you, Commissioner Green. Could we please go to Commissioner Luthi, if you wouldn't mind? She was on there, and then we'll come to you, Commissioner Quinney. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually agree with most of what you said. I am not opposed to going to the low density in this application. I think West Jordan City is a grand example of let's keep lowering our density, because then it can be a good buffer between our already high density and other high density, and the result is that most of West Jordan is high density or medium density. And I support keeping what low density we currently have. I would be happy to support either keeping this at very low density or bringing it up to the proposed low density of R112. But I think going to a medium density, even though there are some other high density around, would be a mistake. And that plan that we just talked about, the one that's currently over there at the medium density between the Ivory subdivision and the high density subdivision, was a perfect example of that. When it came before, we discussed it being low density, and the conversation was, we need to remove it, we need to lower it, or higher the density in order to act as a buffer. And I think by doing that over and over again, we're losing all of it.
Thank you, Commissioner Luthi. Commissioner Quinney, thanks for your patience.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and speak a little bit against what's already been said. I think that the application as presented did make sense. And I'm going to sound like I'm kind of contradicting myself, but I feel like 5600 kind of acts as a buffer. I'm not saying that we need to go from high density to, very high medium and kind of just do this quick this slow transition, but I think having a difference of 2,000 square feet in a lot is really not that big a deal to me. And it matches what we've already granted to the same applicant in the same island that we're considering here, further south of this application. And I know we're not talking about the speculation, but I'm going to do it anyway. I think that because we have the ability to look at each individual application, we still can control what's going in when we get that application. We don't have to say, oh, well, we did it this one time, so we have to do it every time. Does it make sense? And I think in this case it makes sense. It's the same transition that we have on the south end of this island. I think that it should remain the same.
Thank you. Back to Commissioner Luthi.
One more thing I would add is I've had several conversations with some of my neighbors, similar to what you had just said, that it's really hard to find the next step up, and I think the next step up would be keeping it at low density and not going to the medium.
Back to Commissioner Quinney, please.
The other one thing that I wanted to say, we keep getting a lot of conversation here on this commission about 8,000 square foot lots. We're not going to do anything less than 8,000. We really don't want to see that. And now we have one that's before us that's got larger than 8,000 square foot lots. It's still a really good application. And now we're arguing again that it's not good enough. And I'm just trying to figure out at what point do we say enough is enough. Let's, we can draw our line in the sand, but let's quit moving that line wider and wider.
Commissioner Green.
I look at this map, and here's my concern, and I'm going to speculate, and I'll speculate the heck out of this. If we make this a medium density residential, it'll be right across the street from a high density, but it will border the medium density across the street. And pretty soon, and I know we're not supposed to speculate, but that whole area will then become medium, and just hear me out, that whole very low density will then become medium density. And it puts the low density areas that are already existing another island. And I don't think we have any, I'd like to see at some point in time some consistent planning where we're not just this subdivision is high density and this subdivision is low density and this subdivision's medium density. I think this, and I guess we have to ask the question, what's the goal of the city? And to me, R112 is one of those things that the city wants to have in its repertoire that we don't have very many of those. When you look across the city, yeah, we have some half acres to the east of this, but you look at the city in general, and most of the city is, I believe, based on my anecdotally, most of the city is medium density or high density, and we don't have a good mix of the low density yet in the city. And we've talked about the west side, west of U-111, but I think we have to maintain some, I don't know what you want to call it, some semblance of, you know, if you want to call it mixed use, whatever you want. I think very low density, and I think very low density here is appropriate. Maybe low density becomes appropriate because of the areas to the south and to the east, but medium density, I just like to see something be in the city besides medium density, and for lack of a better term, tract housing. It'd be nice to see, you know, some larger houses go in, and I mean, I think the very low density ought to stay, but I'm not completely opposed to going to the low density if that's where our vision wants to take us, but medium density here to me is not an option.
Thank you. Commissioner Quinney?
Okay, so I'm just going to jump on your conversation here about islands, and I'm looking at this map, and everybody can see it, and what I see is a majority of this being medium density with a couple of little islands, one of high density. We've got this low density, and then we've got this very low density. I don't see the point of making this low density and just creating a larger island in the middle. Why don't we make this medium density and continue to map it and mirror it to what the rest of this map looks like? Instead of creating larger islands, I think we should be eliminating those islands. And I completely agree that we need to find other places. I just don't think this is the place where we draw our line in the sand and say, let's make this all low density and just make a wider island.
Commissioner Luthi?
I get where you're coming from. I disagree with it, but I get where you're coming from. As far as the comment of drawing the line on R110 versus R112, I think they're two separate issues. When we're talking medium density, I think R110 is the line we had kind of talked about. This is a separate discussion because this was the discussion of the low density. When we had looked at some of the other projects, it wasn't changing it. Low density wasn't even an option. We were looking at medium density and whether we wanted medium density on the lower end or medium density on the higher end. And this is a separate issue because we're talking very low density already, not something where it already is medium or even low trying to go to medium. It's very low density already.
Commissioner Green?
And while I agree, I can see where you're coming from the island perspective. I just think that when we start talking about medium density, that starts to allow medium density gets into range of densities that we just don't want to have. And you know, I know we can't look to the future, but it's one of those things that it concerns me about taking a piece of, right now most of that property is zoned A1. So we're talking about taking we're talking about taking the A1 and moving it to, you know, R110, and I'm concerned about that. I mean, I can live with I could live with the R112. I'd rather see it stay rural residential, in a half acre, you know. I guess the 12,000 square foot lots, what, about a third? See, I'd rather go half acre lots there in low density, but that's just me. They would be consistent with everything to the east. But I mean, I can see where you're coming from, but I think we need to have some mix of housing in the city that's not just fill in medium density wherever we go.
Commissioner England?
Yes, thank you. I'm a little torn on this one. We've got before us the general plan here, which should be our guidance. It should really kind of direct what we're supposed to do. I'm not saying there can't be any exceptions to that, but I don't know if it'd be appropriate at this point. There was a comment made earlier on what is the pressing need, what is driving this R110 in the application, and what hardship would come from the staff recommendation of R112F. Would that be appropriate to hear from the applicant at this point in time?
Sure, you mean addressing the staff?
Absolutely.
Yes, because I had a similar question to that maybe they could speak on, is when, in the criteria, when staff is saying that they don't have a problem with the application, I'm assuming that you're meaning the basically amended application of going to 12 instead of 10. Not talking about the applicant's application, but the staff's recommendation of going 12 that the staff doesn't have a problem with. Could you clarify that for Commissioner England and for myself?
Our recommendation, we don't have a problem with it going to 12s.
Right, that's what I was assuming. You're talking about your recommendation, not the applicant's recommendation. Thank you. And then to Commissioner England's question.
I think my question is more for the applicant. Would it be appropriate for them to come up and address us as a body, and maybe they don't have an issue with that? I don't know.
We can suspend the rules and have them come back up. Mr. Gardner, did you have something to
Yeah,
mention as well?
just want to throw a little bit of information out here now. The applicant is asking for R110 lots, and a third of those will be much larger than 10,000 is a minimum. A third of those will be much larger than 10,000 square foot lots. Some will be in the 12, 13,000 square foot range. You know, and as far as consistency, if you're looking at a map, then no, it's not consistent because you're looking at a map. But if you're looking at the use, you know, one of the goals in the general plan, it says in West Jordan, the primary housing type should be single-family residential. That's what they're proposing. 10s, 12s will be consistent with everything that's around there. You know, the lots will be a little bit smaller. They'll certainly be a lot smaller than half-acre lots. I don't know if in this day and age, with the price of real estate, and again, that's not your issue, but that's the reason the applicant's proposing 10,000 square foot lots, because real estate is so expensive. You know, and I just want to, so the difference between a 10,000 square foot lot subdivision and a 12,000 square foot lot subdivision. Now this is just taking the square footage, minusing 20% for roads and sidewalks. You'd have 63 homes at 10,000 square foot lots and 53 homes at a 12,000 square foot lot. And then also in the city, the predominant zoning of housing in the city is R110 by a long shot. Over 16.5% of the city is R110. You know, a little over 3,400 acres. R112, there's about 650 acres of R112 zoning. And believe it or not, there's 1,586 acres of R18. So this really is an R110 community, and it has been for a long, long time. And so R110 is not terribly inconsistent with what is built throughout West Jordan. The other thing that we need to remember is a lot of what is built upon the lot, you have a lot of control over by the house size. And, you know, with putting a larger and F-size home, you know, that's difficult to fit on, you know, almost impossible to fit on an R18 lot, very tight on R110, but you can do it, as we've seen out west by Bacchus Highway. And so really the quality of the subdivision anymore is really the house size you put on it and the materials the house is made out of, and not so much the lot. Many people aren't even looking for a lot of lawn to maintain anymore, and that's the absolute truth. And so just some food for thought there.
Thank you. Commissioner England, did you still want to hear from the applicant, do some follow-up questions?
If they'd like to come up and address this.
It'd require a motion. Would you like to make that motion?
Yeah, I would motion to suspend the rules so we can hear from the applicant.
Do we have a second to the motion? A motion by Commissioner England, a second by Commissioner Quinney. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously 6-0. Mr. Bowler, if you'd like to come back up and address any concerns that have been brought up during our friendly bantering here on the rostrum.
Thank you for taking the time to think through this. I know it's a difficult process, and I appreciate the varying points of view. I appreciate very much the opportunity to stand back up. Kyle just barely asked me, he said, so do they give you a chance to address all of these concerns, or how does this work? And not often, so thank you for that. If you'll bear with me, I would like to give you maybe a longer answer than what you might expect. Will that be okay?
You have up to 10 minutes.
Great. If I go over that, then I'll happily sit down. Because of my religious involvement in the area, I have some responsibility. Oh, that's not a very good pointer. Does this have a better pointer? Right there. Okay. I have some responsibility for an area that looks something like this, 5600 west down to 7800 south, across Grizzly Way there, over in back like this, and up over again, and all the way up to 6600 south in Ochre Shadows. We are seeing a migration, is what we affectionately call it, of good people that are moving to Harriman, Riverton, and South Jordan. And as I visit with these good people and say, now why are you leaving our area? Almost every time it's something like this. We love our neighbors, we even like the schools, but it's time for us to move up, and we can't find anything in the area that fits our needs. Kyle Bybee was one of those people, and I said, don't leave, bear with me as I try and do something here. My goal is not to encroach on myself. I enjoy very much a private road. I have little kids, and frankly, we ride horses up and down the road and across the street on this property. I don't own the property currently. There was another developer that you would all recognize that was trying to purchase the property. When I sat down with that developer and expressed what I would like to see go in there, it was very different than what they thought should go in there. They felt like, because of recent approvals here and because of existing zoning here, which again is an R16 here and an R16 here, that this should be something in the neighborhood of a transition to R16 and R18. Now, that's their opinion. Whether it would have been approved or not is maybe somewhat irrelevant to you, but it was relevant to me because I lived there. And so I went to the different property owners and said, would you give me a chance to make something work? And so my goal is to provide a place for good people like the Bybees to stay within this small geographical area and move up. I quite honestly and transparently, we tried to lay it out with 12,000 square foot lots. That was my view as well. The problem we have is we actually, even at an R110, only fit 42 lots on there. I don't know if you had a chance to look at that layout or not. It's kind of an odd-shaped piece because of existing homes. The other part is there's a couple people that wanted half-acre lots, and so we specifically carved out some half-acre lots for these people. Generally speaking, half-acre lots, and I'm familiar with that because that whole neighborhood is half acres, they're too expensive. That's a common concern. In fact, a lot of those people would like to move on to the quarter-acre lots because we don't have secondary water in this area. So it's too much land for the cost of water. So, as I tried to lay out 12,000 square foot lots in here, I looked at it and it can't pencil for what I have to pay for the property. 10,000 square foot lots do pencil, and it makes a lot of sense to do that because then I can buffer 5600 west. So again, going back to the layout that I've actually worked on quite a bit, the only quarter acre lots in there are along 5600 west already, Everything else is already 12,000 square feet or larger. And that was the intent. Now, even along 5600, you'll notice they're extra deep. Again, the intention was these are going to be my neighbors, not just people that I'll sell to and move on. And so we were trying to give them a little bit of extra distance between 5600 West and their homes. Now, E versus F. I appreciated very much what Mr. Gardner said and the conversation here. That, in my opinion, is a better place to look if you're saying, hey, let's upgrade this. Because I'm with you on that conversation, I would support that. As much as it may limit the amount of people that can buy in there, again, that's what we're trying to provide. Is we're trying to provide a move-up place for good West Jordan people that live in that small geographical area, can keep their kids going to the same schools, and yet have a bigger house for a growing family. So I think F-size homes are a good idea. Thank you for listening to me go on.
Thank you. Commissioner Green, do you have questions for Mr. Bowler? Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you for coming up and addressing that.
Thank you for the extra time.
Mm-hmm. So in discussion with that, I'm looking on page 16 and directing it at Commissioner Luthi in the second paragraph from the minutes from the General Plan Committee. Says Nicole Luthi stated that the Planning Commission recommended against that change, meaning from low density to medium density. Because West Jordan already has an abundance of medium density options, it's important to protect what little low density remains. Medium density draws in the first-time home buyer, but doesn't encourage people to stay when looking to move up to a larger home, so they're leaving West Jordan, as Mr. Bowler indicated from his experience, and as we have concurred in many meetings that we want a variety of homes. Could you elaborate on that a little for us, please? Thank you.
I think the discussion that we had there was the exact discussion that you just had. And in my neighborhood, I live in a larger lot in a neighborhood, but there are some sub-neighborhoods that are of that same variety where they want to find their forever home and are having a hard time finding that. That was the discussion, was if we offer the option of having some third-acre lots, that we're losing people to South Jordan, Harriman, Riverton, exactly that same discussion, and I'm completely even on board with everything you just described. I think that was eye-opening, the idea that most of it is already to that point. The only thing that still kind of holds me back on it, honestly, is the idea that as soon as this goes to medium density, everything else is too. And there's no way to protect that just that row could be allowed to be medium density and the rest be zoned to a lower density. The concern is that the next guy that develops goes back to what you had just said. Okay, well, you've already got medium now, let's put in some R16s. That's the worry. And it all comes down to protecting and giving just that, somewhere for somebody to stay in West Jordan and stay in the area, but provide them that new development. So that was the discussion that we had, was 100% what he just said.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that you want to protect the not necessarily very low density residential, but keep it to low density residential per the staff's recommendation.
They had talked about both, about leaving it alone and talked about bringing it to low, and either was acceptable by everybody that was there at the committee. But the discussion was to provide something a little bit nicer for those that want to stay and want to create a little bit nicer of a community, something that they could find in one of those other areas that we could provide in West Jordan.
And were they specifically talking about 12,000 square foot lots, or here we have 63, 10,000?
No, they were only talking very low and low. I think that was added by staff themselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay, just wanted to make sure that I was understanding recommendations, because to me, again, obviously there's pros and cons on every side, and I really believe that the best judgment comes, the best decision comes from the collaborative input of many, many people and committees versus one person's educated guess. So we've got the General Plan Committee, we've got city staff, we've got current zoning, and we've got a lot of people that have looked at this, so I'm just trying to make sure I understand what these bodies are recommending, since there is argument on both sides. So 63 10,000 minimum, 10,000 square foot minimum lots. Many of them would be 12,000 feet, about 53 of them. Commissioner Green.
Couple more comments. Mr. Gardner made mention that the majority of the housing in West Jordan is medium density. I guess the question that we need to ask, and I think Commissioner Luthi, I think you've alluded to this, is that we're not sure that that's the direction we want to go to make all the housing in West Jordan medium density. And that's really the question, is how much more medium density do we need? This adds another 60, I know it's only 60 houses, or 40, as the applicant testified, 40 houses, but it's 40 houses of medium density that will continue to be built on. And the question is, how much do we want to have, even though I live in a medium density residential area? I do have a question for staff. We looked at that streetscape ordinance a couple of weeks ago. I'm assuming that has not passed the city council yet. But my question is, with this development, is it because this application was made the way when it was, the streetscape plan won't apply to this?
No, if the subdivision is submitted before the ordinance is passed, then I think they have some argument that it doesn't apply. But right now, we're just dealing with land use. So
okay.
Yes,
because as I look at the, it's hard to tell from the, from the map how this is going to work. But I'm assuming 5600 South or 5600 West is a street that the new ordinance would apply to.
It's definitely an arterial street. Yes.
So I think that, as we look at this and if the ordinance passed, I think we're still going to have a streetscape issue there as well for the houses that may be along 5600 West. Those are my comments.
Thank you. And, we just had the applicant mentioning that R112 doesn't pencil out. So I'd be amenable to perhaps going from very low density residential to low density, but agreed that medium density would be a big swing. And I don't believe that I could support that at this point in time, but the low density residential doesn't work for the applicant either, even if this were passed. So that really doesn't help one way or the other.
So
is there something I'm missing on that, Mr. Gardner?
No, but I've worked in a few communities, and I've always been confused why R110 in West Jordan is considered medium density. I worked in a community where a 10,000 square foot lot would have been agriculture. And so and I've often wondered that, because in my estimation, a 10,000 square foot lot is low density. It is, because you don't even get 4 houses to the acre after the roads and everything are factored in. And so, just saying that in my estimation, it should be already a low density land use designation.
Understood. We're just like double zoning up. You go from very low, not only to low, but to medium. So it's just, I see the pros and cons either way. So I understand what you're saying, that within our designation, the medium is still larger than some others. Thank you. Let's go to Commissioner Green, please.
I'm going to piggyback off on a comment that you just made about that the R112 doesn't pencil in for the developer. I don't think it's, and maybe you can correct me, you can throw up your hands and wave if I make this statement incorrectly, but I don't think it's our responsibility to determine whether a developer makes profit or not in the city. Our job is to ensure that we have the appropriate land use planning. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, that's a correct statement. Yeah, you should not take money into account. You're mainly with the land use map amendment, you're focused on those criteria that are right in the ordinance that are set forth in the staff report.
Yes, thank you, and I guess that I should clarify, I wasn't trying to bring, all I was trying to say is it probably wouldn't move forward anyway. You know, if you go 112, the applicant's already said that, that's not what he's going to do with it. Thank you for clarifying that. Yes, instead of money, I was looking at feasibility. Commissioner Quinney.
Yes, thank you. I may have missed this. Tell me again the difference between an E and an F-size house. I was looking at this. Is it on here?
Square footage.
Where did, I'm missing it if it's on here.
I don't. I think an F-size home's about, I believe so. I used to have a cheat sheet, but I don't have.
Okay, so I'm hearing 3,500 for an F-size house, right?
He's going to find it right here.
And you mentioned earlier that there's no way you're going to fit an F-size house on a traditional 10,000 square foot lot, right?
Yeah,
we've already had testimony that we're going to have, what's that? Or 8,000, either way. But we've already had, I mean, I don't know what we're trying to accomplish with a 3,500 square foot house. We're not going to get this dinky little lot that surrounds this gigantic house, right? So if we put the restriction on this of having an F-size lot or an F-size house on these lots, doesn't that accomplish the same purpose that we're trying to get to right here anyway? Of having bigger houses that are ready for that next step family. We're avoiding the starter home issue that we've been running into here in West Jordan. We're getting that next size house that's quality made for the family that's a little bit more mature and that wants to stay inside of the community that they already live in. I think we're accomplishing that if we put the restriction of F-size houses and that we're just, I get it, we don't want to do the double up, but that doesn't matter to me. I mean, really what matters is the quality of the house. And if we say we're going to do 3,500 square foot houses on these lots, and that's got to be what we're looking at a minimum, we're going to accomplish what we're looking for.
No, good point. I think maybe there's a lot of focus on the land size, the parcel size versus the home size. Thank you. So any questions regarding that topic before we go to Commissioner England? Is everyone clear on what size home we're talking about? It's not just the land.
Isn't the staff's recommending?
Let's, could we, let's go to Commissioner Green and then Commissioner England. We'll come back to you so we can address this item. Yes, thank you. Could you hit your microphone, please?
But
Thank
the
you.
staff's recommending a 12F. Commissioner Quinney, are you recommending a 10F? That would be my question, because the staff's recommending a 12F. So I guess the question I have back to you is what's consistent with a 10,000 square foot with an R110 is can you put an F-sized house in an R110 lot?
Yes, you can. And I want to add something with the F-size home. In today's market, in a larger home, people are also asking for 3-car garages. You know, in Ivory above U111, that property about 8200 South, they've actually they've actually widened the lot so they could put bigger homes there with the 3-car garages because people are walking away when they can't get a 3-car garage on the lot. Now, to reiterate what Mr. Buller said is the only thing that he wants 10,000 is right along 5600 West, and the rest of the subdivision would be, and I've looked at his concept plan, and the rest of it will be 12 and up. You know, so you're going to get larger homes in there, regardless. And the very unique thing here is that, and I know he could pack up and move tomorrow, but I don't think he is. But he does live right across the street from this development, so this literally is his neighborhood, and so.
Thank you. Commissioner England, do you have a comment on this, or can we still flesh it out with Commissioner Quinney? Is it a new topic or the same topic?
I'm agreeing with Commissioner Quinney. You know, I'm hesitant to support the lower density, but I think all things considered with this unique plot of land here with what we're talking about here with the minimum lot sizes are being, you know, really facing 5600 West there. with the 12 and 13,000 square foot lots throughout the rest of the neighborhood or subdivision there. I'd be fully in support of. I think we heard testimony from the applicant. The R110F is something that he would support, and he liked that idea. It's something that I would fully support. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Commissioner Quinney.
Yeah, I was just going to respond to the same thing that the applicant said. He'd be totally in favor of F-size homes. This wasn't my idea. This was his idea. So, I mean, he's putting the restriction on himself. We're going to get larger, nicer homes, which means, yeah, he could do a 10,000 square foot lot, but he's not going to, because these houses aren't going to fit with 3-car garages and 3,400 square feet of space inside the house on a 10,000 square foot lot. It's just not going to work. We're going to see a nice project here, and yes, it's medium density, but it's not going to look like a medium density project.
Thank you. And of course, we're looking at the future land use map and the zoning. How do we, question for staff then, because you're mentioning the proposal of, currently, I know this isn't the concept plan or the final plat or anything, but 63 homes of 10,000 square foot minimum, about 53 homes of 12,000. How do we craft the language? Because if I'm understanding the tenor of the conversation, we don't want all 10,000 square foot lots, and they all can't be if we're putting the F-size home there. But how do we craft the language to ensure that we have the 12,000 square foot lots? We can't do that, right? So it's either all or nothing here on approving it and just hoping, nothing disparaging against the applicant, just saying there isn't any teeth in that to be able to enforce that. Once it's passed, and technically everything could be 10,000. Thoughts on that?
I think if he's going to put it.
Oh, Commissioner Luthi.
Sorry.
Commissioner Quinney.
I just think that if he's going to put F-size homes, we put the restriction of F-size homes. He's not going to put F-size homes on 10,000 square foot lots. It's just not going to happen because he's not going to sell any of those houses. And so, speaking of not penciling out, if he builds a bunch of houses that aren't going to work out for him, that's just wasting money. I'm curious where we're at on this.
Then following up, what about the 10,000 square foot lots, those 63, that you can't put an F-size home on? Being devil's advocate here.
Well,
Commissioner Quinney.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but if we say this is R110F, he can't put smaller than an F-size home, right? So that's his problem. If he wants to put 10,000 square foot lots out there, yes, that ends up being our issue. But I don't think he's going to do that, right? I think we got to take the applicant at his word that he's going to build nice homes on bigger lots than 10,000, but he needs to have the ability to have a slightly smaller lot along that artery so that it looks consistent. But I mean, I just think we're arguing for the sake of arguing anymore.
Sure. We found, I'm just trying to make sure that we do the public right by looking at all the possibilities. We've seen parcels get sold and resold, and then this runs with the parcel, not the owner. So, good point. Commissioner England.
I think what we're doing with this language of R110F is he's got two options. He can run small lots along 5600 West, and I think what he's going to be forced to do is pare down those to 2-car garages, correct me if I'm wrong, and the rest of the neighborhood that would then be 3-car garages. He has the ability to run the 10,000 square foot lots if this is what we approve and have those smaller 2-car garages. He's going to have a hard time selling those. You may get the starter home folks in there, but I think he stated, and we take him at face value, that he is looking for, that second generation, the second home. Just my thoughts.
Thank you. And I always love bringing up what ifs and devil's advocate so that we make sure we address all sides of it. Thank you. Commissioner Luthi.
It probably will be a beautiful neighborhood, but it still doesn't provide that change of a little bit more open space. And the discussion was had, this is going back to the previous committee that had made the recommendation, the discussion was had that there still are people that don't just want a 1/4-acre lot, they want a third or they want a half, and we need to somewhere keep that in mind, and it can't just be on the other side of U192 or whatever it is. I don't have that in front of me. 111. Thank you. I'm combining a bunch of different roadways here.
You need to use the radio station on your car.
Not on mine, but
Thank you. Commissioner Green.
couple of last things.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay.
Now I lost my the first one was, I'm going to have, and this is obviously, we're talking about future land use map and not the subdivision plat, but I have a adding a bunch of houses along 5600 West when that's going to become a major artery that are going to be driveways opening up on 5600 West if they face it. So for what that's worth.
That's not going to happen. That won't happen.
That won't, so the concept plan that we see now is not gonna work.
Now, the
So
concept plan shows the lots would come into the interior street. 56 is an arterial, so.
Yeah.
Now I can't remember what the last thing I was gonna say was. The last thing I'm gonna say is I have to tell you, from a standpoint, I'm not sure I want to try to go against the General Land Use Plan Committee.
Thank you. Great discussion. Would anyone like to tender a motion? Commissioner Quinney.
I'm going to do this because I want to see where we're at. Based on the analysis and findings contained in this report, let me get to the right one here. Set forth this report, and upon the evidence and explanations received today, I move the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council to amend the West Jordan future land use map from very low density residential to medium density residential based upon this conversation, and amend the zoning map from RR1D to R110F.
Commissioner England.
I would second that.
A motion by Commissioner Quinney, a second by Commissioner England. Discussion to the motion. If I could ask a question to Commissioner Green, would you like to would you expound on the statement that you just made? You're not going to go against the General Plan Committee.
I think the General Land Use Plan Committee, one of the reasons they exist is to help us look at what the future land use should be, and that's why we've empowered them. That's why they meet once a quarter. That's why we're trying to look at the future land use holistically. And I think that they've got a good sense. I think they have a good sense of the community as well. And I'm not sure that I want to go against that.
Thank you, Commissioner Quinney.
I'm going to just kind of disagree a little bit. I think it's great, and that you don't want to go against them. But their function in this role is the same as our function. I see it as the same function that we have as it relates to City Council, and that is as a recommending body, right? They have a meeting once a quarter. They don't have as much experience doing this. We've been doing this, most of us, now for quite a while. So we've been doing this and we're a little bit more practiced at it. We have a little bit more insight and ability to understand it. So their recommendation, while great, was only 3 people versus we have 6 people plus talking with staff. And we're going to make a recommendation today that's going to be heard by City Council and ultimately decided by them anyway. So all we're doing is providing a second set of opinions to them. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that.
Thank you. Commissioner Luthi.
The only thing I would add to that is that out of the people that were there at that committee meeting, was it 2 or 3 of them are realtors? So they do have a sense of the community and they do have a sense of what's working as far as for sale of homes. So they do have some very serious experience on what they're recommending. Is it 2 or 3?
2 are realtors, one's an engineer, one's a professional planner for Salt Lake County.
So that they have real experience. It's not that they are somebody that has never done this before. They are legitimately have the experience to run it.
And were they the ones in attendance? I recall 2 were absent that night, so we didn't have...
But the ones that he just named were the ones that are the 2 realtors and then the one that's on the, was it Salt Lake County? Yeah, planning. So they know what they're doing as far as having experience goes.
Very good. And agreed, Commissioner Quinney, I agree with that. And then, devil's advocate as always, how frustrated do we get when sometimes our recommendations aren't listened to as much as we wish they would. So, yeah, I think, a lot of us are seeing things on both sides here. Yeah, Mr. McCandless.
Just quickly, there are 2 zoning designations on this property. I think it was mentioned in the motion. the RR1D. I don't know that,
I can't hear you.
I don't know that the RR.5FZC was also mentioned in the motion.
Today?
I don't think it's in here.
It's not
That-
in here.
that's not on the-
The Ray submitted motion in here,
Okay.
just the change.
Do we need to add anything, Mr. Murray?
So are you referring to we've got the future land use map designation as well as the zoning designation?
Yeah, all I'm saying is there's two zoning designations on the property, and I think only one was mentioned.
Oh, okay, yeah, it wouldn't hurt to fix that or amend the motion to reflect the both current designations?
It's not in our packet.
Okay.
What is the second zoning designation, please?
RR-20FZC.
So it's up there on the, it's on the screen too.
And the R1.
So that part stays the same.
No, that's the change.
Okay, so help me out here. I wrote down what I need to on the other one. Oh, okay, got you. All right. Can you go back to that so I can read that again? All right, so just reread this and change the one back. Okay. So amended motion to, for a positive recommendation to the city council to amend the West Jordan future land use map from very low density residential, which is this RR1D and the RR20F. Am I on the right course here?
Just go from
Here? So, okay, from very low density residential to medium density residential and rezone from RR1D, rural residential 1 acre minimum lot zone, and RR20F ZC. Rural residential, this is a lot of words, 20,000 square foot lots with zoning conditions zoned to R110F, the single family residentials. Did I get that now? Are we there?
You did get
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll make these recommendations.
Who seconded this motion? I think
I seconded it.
It was Commissioner England.
I can second again.
So you'll accept that friendly amendment?
I second.
Thank you. Any discussion to that amended motion? Well, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No.
No.
Motion is rejected 4-2 with Commissioners Pack, Luthi, Hatch, and Green casting the dissenting votes. Do we want a different motion?
That's why I pushed the button.
Commissioner Green.
So I'm going to move that based on the information and findings set forth in the report and the evidence and explanations received today, I move that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council to amend the West Jordan future land use map from very low density to low density residential as recommended by the General Plan Committee, and amend the zoning map from RR1D and RR20F to R112F.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion? Commissioner Hatch?
I'll second that.
A motion by Commissioner Green, a second by Commissioner Hatch. Discussion to this motion. Seeing no discussion, let's vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 3-2. Can't be 3-2. 4-2.
I only heard 3 yeas.
Yes, let's clarify. Motion carries 4-2 with Commissioners Quinney and England casting the dissenting votes, correct? Motion passes 4-2. Commissioner Green.
And I'll just interject that based on what we've adopted as kind of a planning commission practice is that if the dissent wants to write a written opinion included in the minutes for the council, that's acceptable if you want to present your position again appropriately.
And I want to say something. The former city attorney said that is not a practice that the planning commission can do. You don't have that authority, am I right, Duncan? Or
Yeah, upon further review, I'd highly recommend it against it as well. Yeah.
They have my opinion on record already, so they don't need it again anyway.
Commissioner Luthi?
I just have one more item. Is the reason it doesn't, and this may be completely the wrong way to do this, but is the reason it doesn't pencil out have to do with setbacks? Because if it's a setback discussion, we've had several instances where we've had it presented to us to waive some of those setback requirements, to allow for some tighter setbacks, while still allowing to keep some of the others. Am I misspeaking? I mean, I know that that's come forth before.
Well, the setback, we did it on Lone View West, but we also changed the zoning to an R16 from an R18. So that's how the reduced setback came in.
Okay.
The Planning Commission doesn't have any authority to waive any setback, nor does
Okay.
the Board of Adjustment. And so, no, the setbacks are pretty rigid in what, well, the Board of Adjustment does if there's an obvious hillside encroaching into the lot and making it unbuildable. But it has to be a physical problem with the lot. But other than that, and that's very, very narrow.
There is no other way around that.
Just,
Okay.
no,
So there was a zoning redone on that one.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. The last item on our agenda this evening is Dannon Way Industrial Park. Is the applicant for that item here? Great. Let's read that into the record here. Dannon Way Industrial Park, 6300 West Dannon Way, preliminary subdivision plat, 12 lots on 18.1 acres in an M1 zone. CIR Engineering, Scott Thorson, is the applicant. Please feel welcome to come forward and present your application.
Hello, my name is Scott Thorson with CIR Engineering here representing the developer. This one's fairly straightforward, just looking to do a 11 to 12 lot subdivision in the industrial area. Be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Questions from Mr. Thorson, beginning with Commissioner Luthi.
I do. Is it 11 or is it 12?
The current one I believe is 11.
Because I keep seeing two different numbers, so it is 11 lots that you're going for.
Correct. 2 of them were combined from the preliminary submittal as there's a potential tenant that would go in there.
Okay.
Other questions? We'll reserve some time for you, Mr. Thorson, if anything comes up in public comment that you'd like to address.
Thank you.
Thank you. And for city staff, we have Ms. Elgin.
Good morning, or good evening, commissioners. The project before you tonight pertains to an 18.1 acre parcels, two parcels equaling 18.1 acres that the applicant would like to divide into 11 industrial lots. As you can see, the area is surrounded to the north, the east, and the south by parcels that are zoned M1 and designated light industrial. And there is one small portion that's near to it that's zoned designated very high density residential. The proposed subdivision, it does comply with all of the requirements of the M1 zone district and of Title 14 of the Municipal Code. So with that, staff recommends that you approve the subdivision of the subject 18.1 acres into 11 lots of the Dannon Way Industrial Park.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Elgin? Great. Thank you for the presentation. We'll open this up to the public if anyone would like to speak on this item. And we'll close the public comment section. Discussion amongst the planning commissioners. Commissioner Green.
Based on the information and findings set forth in the staff report and upon the evidence and explanations tonight, I move that the Planning Commission approve the preliminary subdivision plat for Dannon Way Industrial Park on approximately 18.1 acres containing 11 lots located at 6300 West Dannon Way, subject to conditions 1 through 6 on the staff report.
Thank you. A motion by Commissioner Green. Do we have a second? Commissioner England?
Yeah, I second that.
Second by Commissioner England. Any discussion to the motion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously 6-0, which brings us to the conclusion of our agenda this evening. Anybody have any announcements, comments? There's a motion to adjourn. Any objection? We stand adjourned until April.
So who wants a copy of this that I made up for the city council? It's the zoning.